Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am really excited to introduce my guest today. This is Alexandra Cousins. She is the visionary founder of the EN.LIGHT LIFE Academy for Regenerative Living. She essentially is on a mission to revolutionize healthcare by guiding people beyond symptom management into true root cause healing. And the key word here is regeneration. This is a new space in the healing, biohacking, longevity space. We are able now to regenerate our cells, our tissue. And so that's why one of the reasons I wanted to have her on. She essentially is blending genomics, peptide bioregulators, enzyme therapy, therapeutic peptides, functional nutrition, ancient healing modalities, quantum principles, and mindset work. So you can see why I wanted to have her on. It is very much in line with the things that I teach and practice day in and day out. And in this podcast, we will get into her history with chronic complex illness, as well as all of the modalities that she tried and why she's finally landed with the power of these peptides and bioregulators and understanding them through the lens of your own unique genetic or epigenetic blueprint, and how we can really use these to regenerate the body. So again, this is probably the most exciting aspect of wellness, the regenerative community. So I'm really excited for you to have a listen. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am Amanda Panacea, and today I am super excited to have an in-depth conversation with Alexandra Cousins. She is a regenerative health expert, and she has a really cool story. So I'm excited to hear about everything that you've been through and everything that you've figured out, and now kind of how you're giving back to coaches, practitioners, and other women. So thanks for joining me, Alexandra.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Amanda. I'm always excited to share my story because, as we know, stories are powerful, and we all have one that got us to a place of sharing wisdom, really. So, as for so many women, I think my story really starts with disordered eating, gaining weight, losing weight, up and down, trauma. I think these pain points sort of, I find touch probably 90% of the women.
Yeah.
And, we think it's the minority. No, it's most of us. And so most of my life, even though I got to health and wellness really in my early 20s, started in India with Ayurveda, and then kind of, trickled down all the various paths. And why? Because I was always looking for the next answer when something stopped working, right? Like we do something for a while, a diet, a methodology, and then at some point it stops working. And then I got to being bedridden at the age of 40. Also so common because typically after a couple of pregnancies, then sort of our immune weaknesses are revealed, hormonal imbalances begin, and before we know it, we find ourselves, whether, officially or unofficially, bedridden with autoimmune conditions, but kind of in some sort of, health crisis. And at that point, I sort of, I decided, okay, enough is enough. I need to figure this out. And with a long list of course, various diagnoses. But at that point, I knew enough to know, well, it's not enough to chase symptoms. And long story short, at that point, I then found my way to deep cellular detoxification, fasting, detoxing. And in some ways, that's also what, really became popular kind of 11 years ago. And dove deep into that, found a lot of regeneration, a lot of healing, and even to a point where I got to a level of health that I had never experienced before. So naturally, because I got that through raw foods and juicing and detoxing and fasting, and in fact, a lot of fasting, my light bulbs went off and I was like, this is the way, as
Yeah.
for so many other extremists, right? And in some ways, I almost feel it doesn't really matter what way you got to, because it could be raw foods, it could be the keto, it could be the low carb lifestyle. Ultimately, what I then sort of, came to realize after hitting upon sort of other new walls, maybe 5, 6, 7 years into that lifestyle, um, I realized, well, actually, there is no one way, and that every one way, as our beloved friend Joel Greene also teaches, there isn't one way that is forever, but rather every which way is going to work for some time, and then depending on your genetics, depending on what you've been doing previously, some new method is going to work. But then what is the truth? And so I do feel that after 27 years of trial and error and numerous certifications, and diving deep then, between science and alternative health, I do find I have figured out the way, knowing that it is forever changing. So
Yeah.
what is that? I think fundamentally we need to understand, and I feel that's where the Russians have really taught me a lot around cellular regeneration and the importance of working with endocrine health. Why? Because as we age and as we're exposed to toxins, that is where the weaknesses are going to start creeping in. So in some ways, they first creep in the endocrine system, affecting the organ system, affecting ultimately metabolism, immune system. And it's kind of like, it's a trickle down effect, it's a domino effect. And that's why I always say there's no such thing as healing one thing. If you've got thyroid issues, I can guarantee it, whether your tests reveal it yet or not, you're going to have digestive issues, you're going to have liver issues invariably, you're going to have immune issues, you're going to have other weaknesses, right? So there is never one thing. Um, and maybe to sort of sidestep for a moment, those new insights came after many years of great health on the raw food diet, on the detox lifestyle, and then perimenopause hit. And at that point, I was like, okay, come on, like we have just achieved a new state of health. Now there's the next thing, right? And again, how many of us, because on social media, everything always looks so perfect, everything looks a certain way. That's not reality. And all we need to do is go to a train station, an airport, look around and see, what do 90%, 95% of the people look like? Not like social media. And so we know, most of us are dealing with health issues, especially once we hit 40 plus plus. And it's not even necessarily that, as often social media wants to teach us, well, you're just not eating enough protein. You're not training hard enough. You're not doing it well enough. No, reality is that we all have genetic weaknesses. We all have epigenetic impact. And very few people in this world have truly understood how to comprehensively address the body. And we're still all figuring it out.
Yes. That is something I try to tell every person that I come across that I work with is like, if you meet someone that tells you you have to do it this way or it's not going to work, or that this is the only thing that's going to help you, run away from them because their confidence is scary because we don't know things, like things are ever evolving and ever changing. And I like that you brought up that so many of us were kind of like not necessarily victim, but we went with the like thing of the times, like whether it was fasting or veganism, or then carnivore hit, and we all kind of were like, oh, this must be it. And then as time goes on, you see that those people that were promoting those lifestyles also had to change or pivot and didn't last in those lifestyles either. So I love that there's like so much nuance, especially with like the genetics and the epigenetic piece that you bring in as well. So tell us, what is genetics versus epigenetics? Like, why is that so important?
Right. So for years, of course, I, dismissed genetics. Why? Because so many
Hmm.
experts go, well, genetics don't really matter. Genetics load the gun, but epigenetics pull the trigger. So, okay, let's all focus on epigenetics because, this is what the experts say. But then when I started looking a little bit deeper, I realized, yes, the concept is true. Epigenetics pull the trigger. However, if you don't know what your genetic blueprint is, and so you don't know what are your weaknesses, what are your inherent weaknesses, how do your genes inherently work, then how can I do the right thing epigenetically to support myself? It's virtually impossible. And this is where, again, I would come in and say, well, the reality is that 70% roughly of the human population has some significant genetic mutation or impact. Yes, I agree. It doesn't always play out that way. Or we can also say, oftentimes, these genetic impacts, which, by the way, they're way more impacts than just the MTHFR gene, because everyone
Yeah.
is always talks about MTHFR. And I'm like, I mean, yes, that's one mutation, but it's not
Right.
most impactful, right? And
Hmm.
80% of what we're taught about around MTHFR is only half correct anyway. Because
Hmm.
everyone
Yeah.
wants to address these epigenetic mutations, whether it's MTHFR or the others, just with supplementation. And, there's big influencers shouting from the rooftop, we can sort you out, in a matter of weeks with these supplements. Yeah, sure, you're going to sort people out and you're going to gain a great testimonial. Where is that person 6, 7, 8 months down the line? Not in a good space. Because if we haven't addressed, again, the deeper issues, the deeper mechanisms, weaknesses of the body, because these genetic mutations ultimately lead to systemic and gradual weaknesses and damages, which by the time that you're 30, 40, certainly 50, they have occurred, right? They just have occurred. And then you can take all the supplements and you can do all the detoxing in the world, but if I'm not regenerating actively the various systems, the endocrine system, the organs of detoxification, the immune system, then I still am not really going to help someone overcome their health issues. I'm only going to help them temporarily. And that was ultimately also the realization with, as wonderful and impactful and necessary as detoxing is, and as much as I still love raw foods and I use them regularly, and I love fasting, but it's one aspect. Just as working on rebuilding and mTOR and proteins and all of that, it's one aspect. So we need to put it all together. And that is where I definitely find repeatedly looking at someone's genetic blueprint gives me such an incredibly accurate idea of what we need to rectify, what we need to address in order to then help their full regeneration. So genetics is your genetic blueprint. It never changes. It's, ideally you would have to test genetics once in your lifetime. But unfortunately, most of the older tests are really bad tests, or I would say even a lot of the tests on the market today are cookie cutter tests. You get maybe a 30, 40, 50, 60-page report, and you think, wow, this is so in depth. Yeah, but it's a cookie cutter report. It's AI generated. It doesn't mean anything, right? It's a PDF printout. Whereas what we do with advanced genomics is there's no cookie cutter. We look at your genetic profile and compare it against your epigenetic in-depth intake form. And then we create a personalized protocol and report. Because again, everything is going to be slightly different depending on your health history, depending on what's happening currently. So everything that's currently happening in your body, which changes all the time, that's what we call epigenetics.
Mm-hmm.
And epigenetics means if I do a fast, then in a month's time, if I do it correctly with the right support, supplementation, etc., I'm going to have a different epigenetic picture than I have today. So whereas my genetics never change, even if I live perfectly and I heal and regenerate everything, I can still retest my genetics. They're always going to be the same. So that means the inclinations and weaknesses of the body, they're going to stay. And they always are going to need support. So in other words, if I have an MTHFR mutation, which is not the most impactful one, but let's stay with that because everyone knows about it, I'll always need some sort of gentle detoxification support, at least intermittently. And then, of course, depending on my lifestyle, etc., I'll need a little bit more attention. Then maybe I have some other genetic impact that allows me or that impairs fatty acid oxidation. So, and this is what I see in, probably, again, 60, 70% of the human population. So no wonder as I get to middle age, I'm going to start struggling with weight issues. And as we know, weight issues for a lot of women, it's not even, the 30, 40, 50 pounds. It's the annoying 10, 15, 20 pounds that even though we're doing all the right things, all of a sudden they're not budging. Oh, and then we look at genetics. Wait a moment, you've got seriously impaired fatty acid oxidation genes that have been building up because it's not like a light switch. So then we need to kind of look at epigenetics, what's happening there, where's the impairments, is it on a mitochondrial level? So has it really gone as deep as mitochondrial degeneration, damage, cell walls that are being damaged that you're not going to only repair again with supplementation. We need, yes, supplementation, but it's a multi-step process. So that's where, of course,
Right.
then peptides, bioregulators come in, all of that.
Yes, very interesting. So I'd love to hear what you think are the most impactful genes or like processes, I guess, that get impacted by our genetics that build up over time like this. So there's like the methylation cycle, fatty
Mhm.
acid oxidation you mentioned. What are some of the other big ones that you see people needing support with?
What I typically see, I would say most of my complex cases are women with the fast comp gene. Yes, also slow comp gene is impactful, but interestingly enough, a fast comp gene often coupled with some MTHFR impact, coupled with histamine impaired genes. And that's pretty much a recipe for disaster.
I think that's
And it's,
me. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because the typical picture of these clients is that they were doing really well until their sort of early 40s. And they were the kind of women, because the fast COMT gene is also known as the warrior gene. So, these are the
Yeah.
high powered go getters, A type personality, super efficient, can deal with anything on the
Yeah. That's
surface.
me. Yeah.
Until we get to our, and for some it's late 30s, beginning 40s, whatever, but it's somewhere in that age range, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what the hell happened? There's an implosion.
Mm.
And yeah, I've definitely noticed since offering these genomic tests, 70% of my hardest clients, that's the picture. And
Yeah.
so, and again, it's not because of, yes, the COMT gene, the fast COMT has set this up for life. But this is where we need to understand it's not just about addressing, the fast COMT. It's
Right.
addressing everything that has happened from that fast COMT. So it's years we're dealing, and I would say this is the case every time that we're dealing with complex issues, with chronic conditions. It's never going to be a one-step process. It's never going to be the keto diet is going to sort it, the peptide is going to sort it, the hormone is going to sort it. No, it's always going to be a systemic and systematic approach, and it's going to take time.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had to tell so many people, we're not going to find a silver bullet. It's not going to be one thing that you need. It's going to be a couple years of restructuring your entire life. And I know that sounds scary, but every system is involved here. And especially with, I guess, the fast COMT, that's where I see everyone I work with is a perfectionist and people pleasing and not listening to their body and disconnected and in sometimes a calcium shell of themselves, and they're disassociating, or the weight gain is like a protective measure. So it's the emotional side of things too, as well. Like you said, very much a
Huge.
full complex picture. Yeah.
Huge. And I think that's where there's so much disservice done to us. We talk so much about women empowerment, and then, don't get me started on the whole hormone train, where now we're saying, women's empowerment is, our right to have hormones. Well, if we call that empowerment, I'm sorry, ladies, that is that is the tip of the freaking iceberg. And I mean, if you want to take it and run with it, go ahead. But it's not the full story. The full story is, can we sit with all of our emotional traumas, dysfunctional patterns that are no one's fault, but they are our responsibility to sort out? And in some ways, that's what takes the longest. It's easy to
Hmm.
get onto a great protocol, and that's what I see with all of my clients is that, I always say 80% of my time spent with them is spent on discussing emotional matters. And then 20%, even less, is okay, yeah, let's also, refine your protocol. But that's the easy part once we
Right.
know what we're doing. But the emotional patterns and holding space for that and reminding our clients to be patient, because the soul, and this is where, we can get woo-woo for a second, but I really do believe that the genetic picture that we are set up with is also the perfect picture for our soul's evolution.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's not just science, it's not just biology. And I think when we begin to look at this picture as a whole, and so, a big part of my journey was letting go of this idea that we can do everything naturally.
Yeah.
Which I so wanted that fairy tale, right? Like, if I only eat so purely, and if I only connect so deeply with God, and, respect the earth and all of that. And it's like, yeah, that's all valid. But then there's also so much of science that we do need to bring in. Why? Because we live in a very imperfect reality. And I think to not make peace with that, so a big part of my healing actually was coming to terms really with the sobering reality of, this is the current status that we live in. Like, let's not fantasize about it. Let's not, I mean, like, hello, I came to live in Bali thinking that I was going to come here to live this perfectly healthy, spiritual lifestyle. No, it's been the exact opposite. And, I always say coming to live in Bali has cured me of all spiritual BS. all of it. And it's
How
been the
so?
most,
Because
well, because it is, I mean, I love the place and I give deep thanks, but it really, it's spiritual Disney World. And Disney
mm,
World is not real. Disney World is fun, but it's not real. You know,
that's a
real,
good analogy.
real is chaos. Real does not fit into a, perfectly orchestrated retreat or workshop for trauma. No, real life means, can I meet my true self and the true self of someone else without judgment, with full compassion, right? Like, are we always going to be perfectly aware human beings? God, I hope not. That's scary to always be perfect. Can we embrace our imperfection? Can we embrace the fact that when we are in our 40s and 50s, we're going to go through massive shifts that are physical and emotional and deeply spiritual, and that there is not an ounce wrong with any of that? And can we also talk about the fact that in that period, we are going to many times over feel as if we are losing it? And that there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, great, you're losing it. Fantastic. You're losing what you're not meant to carry anymore. And the process of that is maddening. It's frightening,
Yeah,
right?
this is this is very much in alignment with what I teach people as well, especially with like because I'm sure you work with a lot of these women who know so much about the science, the biochemistry and bioenergetics, and even nervous system and trauma work, and they still feel horrible, even though they like know so much and do so much that seems right, they're still struggling. And I'm like, what I had to shift away from was instead of obsessing about learning everything, because like we talked about, you won't, it's going to change. I'm going to get really good at just being able to be with myself when shit is uncomfortable. I'm going to get really good at learning how to be with just the boring reality of everyday life because I was trying really hard to avoid that for so many decades. That if I can just be with what is, it doesn't matter what's happening. If I can learn to
100%.
develop that skill, that capacity, then I'm not going to care about the biochemistry anymore.
Well, to me, that is real presence.
Yeah.
It's a bit
Mhm.
like when my husband, who has, of course, been the bearer of all, the perimenopausal shitstorms, um, and he's been, amazing at that. But then when some days he would come to me and go, well, let's do a chant together. It's like, no, no, actually, I love chanting and it's an amazing tool. And I have come to the matured right to be with the rawness of my emotions.
Mhm.
And, and of course, I mean, I also come from a history of doing a lot of medicine work and thinking that was it. And, and realizing this is the medicine, this moment when I am triggered, when my 4-year-old is, fully coming alive and wants to and needs to be heard, instead of kind of, chanting her away. No, my luxury is taking myself to the bedroom, telling my whole family, I ain't here for you today, and just being with the 4-year-old and giving her full attention rather than, lighting the incense or doing some other
Mhm.
default tactic. And I find that's the, matured feminine. Okay, can we be with all those parts? And can
Right.
we attend? So can I be with the, wise woman? Can I be with the woman that is full of eros and power? And can I also be with the 4-year-old? Can I be with the 7-year-old? And can I love and meet with all of them with the same presence and compassion?
Yeah. Very, very well said. Beautiful. So let's get back into hormones and peptides and bioregulators because I this is a big piece of what I wanted to chat with you about. Um, because you're working specifically with women in this age group. And I don't see a lot of people like really in this niche. It's more like fitness and anti-aging and just like people who look already healthy using peptides. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we can really use these for these chronic systemic conditions in a very targeted, safe way. And you can even do this yourself. Like, not a medical
Absolutely.
doctor, not medical advice, but you don't need to spend thousands of dollars to find somebody who's going to prescribe these for you. Um, so tell us a little bit about like what are the changes that happen in perimenopause that are so difficult? And what's your opinion on hormone replacement therapy? And then
Mm-hmm.
third part of that question is how can peptides help prevent needing hormone replacement therapy?
Right. So I think the first thing to understand of the whole perimenopausal phase is that the way that I see it, and this is very much what the Russian system also teaches, is that as hormones fluctuate, so hormones are protective, yes, that's true. But as they fluctuate, which is we need to always remind ourselves it's a natural process. Just as we go from being a child and we enter puberty, and that's a natural process, and we're not going to go and medicate puberty. Well, then again, many doctors do, right? They put young girls on the pill. Boom. That's already mistake number one. Grave mistake, which sets women up guaranteed for perimenopausal shitstorms. If you've been on the
Mm,
pill for most of your life, you're going to have perimenopausal issues and menopausal issues. So when we see that just as puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause is a natural phase of life. And sure, as many of these phases of life, they're not comfortable. They're not perfectly, they don't come with a beautiful ribbon and, an elegant process to go with. Again, some women are blessed genetically, 95% of us aren't. And so as these fluctuations start to happen, they reveal the deeper weaknesses in the body that were kind of being band-aided, covered up by the hormones. So I would say perimenopause is actually the fabulously annoying or annoyingly fabulous process of revealing our true state of health and giving us a reality check so that then we can take action, not band-aiding. I mean, sure, then again, if that is what we choose to do, band-aid, but know what you're doing, right? Like I always say, we live in a world, anything is possible. Let's not judge any which way, because if I choose to band-aid, it's my choice, but I need to be informed. So the problem that I have with the whole medical system is that we're being sold hormones as, you must be on them, and that's your, empowered right, but no one tells us what is the story underneath. Um, So, and in fact, only this morning, and I was so glad to hear, really for the first time, a doctor of significance, Dr. Pompa, who I do
mm,
like and respect in many ways. And I just heard a reel from him this morning saying, if we want to make America healthy again, he was teaching to colleagues, if we want to make America healthy again, we need to stop prescribing hormones blindly, and we need to address the deficiencies and weaknesses and damages underneath the hormonal imbalances. And I was like, hallelujah, finally someone who is saying it. And that this doesn't mean that HRT is the devil and should never be used. So it's again, we need to come out of this way of thinking that something is either always good or always bad. No, there's nuances, right? It's a bit like antidepressants. Generally, is that something that you want to live with? Ideally not. Can they be helpful in some situations as, sort of a momentary, um, what is it, helping hand? Yes, as long as I use it to then ideally come off.
Yeah.
So with HRT, I would say it's a little bit different. The way that I like to work is to, before we go and do anything, let's work on all the systems that are connected to hormonal health, because we have to remember that hormones are only ever symptoms. Hormones are not root causes of anything, because hormonal household depends on endocrine health, immune health, gut health, liver health, methylation status. So there's so much that's connected. So to kind of see, to even just put out there, oh, perimenopause, you need hormones. Hang on. The first thing we should do is we should address endocrine weakness. And this is what the Russians do. And isn't it interesting that the very first sort of prescription of the Russian health model is peptide bioregulators for the hypothalamus, pineal, pituitary gland, specifically hypothalamus. Why would that be? And why is that so successful? Well, because the hypothalamus is the master gland, the master regulator gland. And if we look at all the properties, and I encourage every woman, look it up for yourself. Go look at what does the hypothalamus do. It literally governs almost every single main function in the body. Sex hormones, digestion, nervous system, circadian rhythms, heat production. Oh, so all of the symptoms that we tend to associate with perimenopause are somehow connected to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is not just the master gland, but if we want to get a little bit woo-woo and kind of look at yogic sciences, the hypothalamus is also the interface between our inside world and the outside reality. And then, well, what reality? Well, 3D, 4D, 5D, 10D, how deep do you want to go? How sensitive are you to all these realities? Some of us are very sensitive. Some of us aren't. Is that good? Is that bad? It just is. Again, it doesn't make some of us more or less evolved, but it's a fact. So the more sensitive we are, the more impacted the hypothalamus is going to be. And that's where certainly all of the compters, who are very sensitive, working on the hypothalamus with peptide bioregulators, capsules, bioregulators like endolutin and epitalon, which is the injectable version. Oftentimes, especially for younger women, but even for older women, that is miraculous. And I've literally had women tell me 2 weeks after starting treatment, like, oh my gosh, it's as if a light switch went off. And that was actually my experience as well. When I started endolutin, literally within 2 or 3 weeks, it was as if a light switch went off, and as if something had come online that I actually hadn't felt kind of my whole life. And I always knew that I had hypothalamic weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried with herbs. I tried with all of the natural things for years, and I did it the right way. And I was very reluctant to kind of go into taking, bioregulators, because they came from animal products, and, all of that. Like, there was so much like, oh my gosh, guilt, shame. But I was also ready to just feel good. I thought, well, let me try it, and worst case, I'm going to be wrong. And within a couple of weeks, it was like, oh my gosh, I felt so good that, and I like to tell this part of the story because it shows, our mental game. I was bobbing around in the waters of Bali, having this realization of like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this good, this grounded, this embodied in years, like so peacefully here, connected to everything. And then I turned to my husband, I'm like, do you think that these bioregulators could be part of like some psyop? And he's like, Alex, just let that shit go. And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, yeah, okay, drop it, you know? But that's how good I felt. It was almost like, is this legal?
Yeah.
Right. And in some ways, it's been this, and of course, there's still ups and downs because that's life, that's human life in a body. But the level of strength and resilience that I have gained in my body since working with these bioregulators has been astounding, and that's why I have to go, well, all the years of raw foodism, which I will never badmouth that time or even that philosophy, because there's a lot of good in it. And I do believe, would we all benefit from periods? And I still have periods within the week, within the month, within my sort of yearly cycles where I am 100% raw. But I now cycle in and out of different, I toggle between different styles of eating, because some days I'm high fat, then I'm high protein. I brought back animal products into my life as much as I desperately, not desperately, but from a heart space, I wanted to stay plant-based. I
Right.
also I also want to clarify here, do I now believe everyone should eat animal products? No. No, I believe that there's some genetics and just even some epigenetic configurations, they're going to do perfectly well on a plant-based diet. So, this is where we have to stay flexible. We have to kind of honor each unique individual. And I also had to come to the realization that, you know what? I have to admit to myself, I prefer eating a piece of fish or a couple of eggs to a huge bowl of lentils and chickpeas. Should be for it, you know?
Right.
And that
Well,
was
that's
part of me.
listening to your body. Yeah.
Yes. Would I prefer to be able to say I'm still vegan? Yes, my ego would prefer it,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And
I think we all have those things. Like you mentioned, not wanting to ever take meds. And I really wanted to do this fully raw. Like we have these idealistic uh, ways that we think our life should go. And when we're hit with those like pings of like, this isn't right for you, we spend a lot of time ignoring it and being in denial until it's screaming at you. And then you're like, fine, I have to listen to this. And developing that skill of listening to that is like an ongoing process, right?
it is, and that's the healing. To me, that's the healing.
Hmm.
Because it's through all of this that I now have come out the other side, and I can truly say I no longer have food phobias. I no longer have even preferences. I just know what works in what cycles. And, I love the fact that now there's a solidity. And that's what I teach my clients as well. I'm not here to say that you should or shouldn't be something. Your tests, your test results, how you feel, your genetics, they inform. But then ultimately, I have worked with clients who are gang ho on staying vegan, and we can make that work too. Do we sometimes have to be a little bit more intelligent about it? Absolutely. So it is about, still staying flexible, staying true to what you feel. But back to
Hmm.
the hormone story,
Yeah.
another big part is, liver dysfunction or sort of degeneration. Even if you've never drunk alcohol or very little and you haven't done any crazy, like, yes, by the time you're 40 or 50, your liver is not going to be in the state that it was when you were 20 or 25. Peptide tissue saturation decreases, like there is an acceleration of degeneration and breaking down of, well, peptide tissue desaturation. We're not going to have as many peptides. We're not going to be able to keep them up just through nutrition. And another, I find solid insight is that for evolutionary purposes, evolution doesn't really care to keep us around forever, right? Like it cares about us being able to reproduce. And then it's kind of like, well, now it's up to you. And that is where I find science sort of meets consciousness, because we can choose, right? I respect those people who say, I don't want to do anything unnatural, I just trust my processes. Great. And I looked at my genetics and went, whoa, there's a lot of impairments there. There's a lot of stuff in the red. Now I understand why I struggled so much, even compared to some of my clients that breeze off after 6 months of protocol, into the sunset. No, that was never me. I always had to struggle so much more. But now I understand why. And then we couple, we put layers of trauma on that and a couple other things. And it's like, yeah, okay, now we see why we struggle. And so we're going to need more support. Regular liver detoxification for some of us is a must, just as regular deep dives into autophagy, mitophagy, mitochondrial support, all of that. And that is what I find makes the difference between, riding through these years and kind of going like, okay, I'm not so bad, versus, wow, I'm getting better and better with age. And that's been my experience, that certainly using all of these tools. And the other thing to maybe address here, because there's so much controversy around peptides, especially the injectables, people thinking peptide injectables are the miracle bullets, right? And especially things like GLP-1s, which also, they're so controversial. They're so kind of hated upon and deeply misunderstood. None of these tools are miracle bullets, right? Not even GLP-1s. But
no, definitely not.
If
they didn't even work for me.
That's also
I tried all of them probably like 8 or 9 times over the last couple of years. Nothing happened.
I agree, which is why I always say GLP-1s, they're not even my favorite peptides for women struggling with weight loss resistance, because most women struggling with weight loss resistance, it's because, again, most of us, it's not because we eat too much. I'm sorry. That's not the issue. It's because there's mitochondrial dysfunction, mitochondrial damage that needs to be addressed. And that mitochondrial damage leads to nervous system dysfunction. And that nervous system dysfunction, it's emotional, but it's also biochemical. Why? Because our body has been running on depletion for so long and on pushing for so long that then it gets to middle age and the body goes, we ain't doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And so the minute that we try to run on force, the body rings the alarm bell, raises cortisol, raises adrenaline, and the body goes haywire and everything stops. Why? Because the body goes, no, we're just not doing this anymore. So for most of these cases, we need to actually eat more, exercise less, practice much more nervous system regulation, have much more support on a mitochondrial and nervous system level and endocrine level. And then we can go and we can detox, and then the weight loss will happen effortlessly. Just the other day, a woman kind of fast comped her, one of those complex cases. She's like, oh my gosh, I dropped 2 gene sizes. But she was still so focused on all the things that were going wrong that she didn't even notice that,
wow.
Yeah, but that's because I'm the same way. Like my husband will have to tell me, but look at all the amazing things. So, I think that's the plight of many of us women. And then we look on social
Mhm.
media and we hear all of these doctors and success stories of, oh, well, hormones sorted me out. How long? How long and how deeply? It's the
Right.
same. It's the same as with thyroid
Right.
hormone. We can dial in thyroid hormones with chemistry, and we're going to have results, and we're going to sing the praises of our practitioner. But where is that woman going to be in 5 and 10 and even 15 years down the line? Not in a good
Right.
place. Not
Well,
in
I
a good
even
place.
kind of think about this with like some herbs too. Like if you put like you're just constantly trying to manipulate things on the surface level, there's always going to be like something else is going to get affected and you're not going to know, was this something I did or is this a new symptom and is this a result of the therapy that I was doing? So that's also like the women that I work with is they've been like, I tried this and it ruined me. I tried this and it was horrible. I tried this. And so you're like, okay, now what are we dealing with? Are we doing the aftermath of everything that you've tried? So they're also really highly sensitive. And where can we start? Where's like the smallest information level cell part of the body? So you mentioned like mitochondria, that like what's the teeniest most effective thing we can do?
So I would,
When you kind of target the mitochondria,
yeah,
are you,
sorry, I think there's a
oh, go ahead.
slight delay. Um, I mean, these days, I would say if you're a middle-aged woman who is facing a lot of complex issues, then working on mitochondria and nervous system regulation uh, is probably going to be one of the most important things, along with endocrine regeneration. And that's where, of course, the bioregulators are just so freaking powerful. Um, and nutrition, because again, most of us, we are actually malnourished from years of over dieting, overtraining, overextending ourselves. And so oftentimes we need to actually nourish ourselves up, because a lot of us, are down to maybe like 1,200, 1,300 calories a day, sometimes less. And then we're like, I can't lose weight. Well, of course, you're not going to lose weight because your system is so weakened on all levels that there's no capacity for regeneration. It's a little bit like those that are always panting detox, detox, detox. Detox is important for sure. And I also believe, because of genetic reasons and epigenetic reasons, we all do need a little bit of support here and there. But if you're doing detox after detox and you're not getting anywhere, it's not because you need more detox or more fasting. It's because your system is too weak to actually do the job. So even fat loss um, is a huge impact for the body. It takes a lot of energy for the body to actually let go of fat and then discard the toxins that are stored in the fat. So if we are not setting things up correctly, how is the body going to let go of the fat? It's literally an impossibility.
With this mitochondrial support, are you speaking in bioregulators? Are you speaking of certain peptides? Or I know you also use the enzymes. What are some of those
Mm-hmm.
tools? Or are you just speaking in circadian rhythms, like getting outside, connecting with nature? What are some of those things we can do to support that mitochondria?
Right. I mean, it is, as always, a little bit of everything. I would say starting, and this is going to be an annoying answer that in some ways no one wants to hear, because it's kind of like, oh, really? Just give me something. But
Yeah.
I would say acknowledging, really spending time acknowledging our stressors. Because especially in middle age, there's also huge emotional reckoning that is happening, right? We are just, our soul wants to heal all of our stuff that pains us. It wants to resolve. It wants to be able to move into the empowered, blissful, erotic, wise woman. But we can't do that until there's all these tendrils. So I would say spending time, and use AI for that, to really do the big emotional reckoning work, to identify what is there, and don't technique your way out of it. Like, dare to go deep into it and to feel what's there, and to trust all of those feelings to guide you to the right answers, right? Like, let go of techniques, trust your own self, trust your soul journey. I would say that's like biggest thing. And then every day, meet your true self and go, what do I need today? Because every day is going to be a little bit different. And then make an effort to give yourself that. And I find a lot of it is going to be a lot of quiet time, things that are peaceful. We always want so much dopamine, but we need the very opposite. We need way more quiet, connected, slow, like literal slowing things down radically. And again, it sounds so annoying because like, oh, how do I do this? And, but
Right.
I can't emphasize that enough. That's going to be a big piece of the work. And this is what I always pull my own clients. It's like, that's where the work is, not another peptide. Got to go there.
Right. Exactly.
Then definitely nourishing yourself, correctly. And of course, this is it's a big word, right? Because we all have our food phobias, our, ideas of what's right and wrong. So oftentimes we do need guidance there, but eating way more simple, and not being afraid, doing what it takes to get away from fearing any one food group. So, if you're terrified of carbs because your body reacts to it, that's where the work is. If you're terrified of, fats and proteins because your body reacts to it, that's where the work is. If you're terrified of fasting, that's where the work is. Because we want to be able to come to a place where I can feast on carbs, I can feast on proteins and fats, I can fast on carbs, fast on fats, fast on water, and basically be equally happy in my body and functioning in my body. And then in terms of, like tools, I would say definitely starting with the bioregulators, especially with the main ones for hypothalamus, circulation, and immune system. So endolutin, bladonix, ventfort. Those are the three main ones. We always want to start with those. If those are too strong and you're super sensitive, in the Russian system, we also work with drops that are absorbed in the mucosa of the mouth, or even topical. They work very well, surprisingly well. As much as so many people out there will say like, oh, they break down in the, no, they work extremely well. The Russians have been working with this for 40 years. They know a couple of things more than we do on peptides generally. So they do work. Work with the basic ones, cycle through them. Give yourself, even though many people feel them within a couple of weeks, give yourself a good 3 months. And know that even if you don't feel anything, they're still working. They're still regenerating. The more degeneration there is, the more you're going to need. I would wait for detoxification of any kind until your system is solid. Because as long as you're still reactive, you're not ready for detox, and that's also why I've stopped kind of punting the enzymes and the flushes, which are amazing tools. But for most people, there's at least 3 to 6 months of regenerative stabilizing work that needs to be done before they can actually efficiently detox. So I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
stopped hunting them only for that reason. And
Yeah.
then as far as peptides, I mean, I would always start with, the basics of for gut health, BPC 157. Yes, I love the injectables, but I also really like Level Up. They have amazing, the ultimate GI repair, which I think is such a powerful tool for pretty much anyone, especially if you've never done any big work. And especially if you still have a lot of immune reactivity, because that inevitably means that there's levels of leaky gut. And then start working with some mitochondrial support in terms of peptides like SS31. I know everyone always talks about MOTS-c, and yes, MOTS-c is great, but for most people, it's not where I would start. I would start with SS31. Why? Because it's a mitochondrial regenerating peptide. So it really helps to heal the mitochondria, which then also massively helps for nervous system dysregulation. So I've put so many of my women on SS31, and literally within even the first shot, 2 hours later, they'll message me and they go, wow, this is miraculous. And this is on a
Wow.
microdose, you know?
Yeah. I
So it
haven't tried
doesn't,
that one, so
it's one of my favorites, especially for women going through, perimenopause, nervous system dysregulation, because when there
yeah.
is so much going on, mitochondrial support is key. Humanin is another one that's really wonderful, especially when there's a lot of nervous system immune reactivity. So typically I work with those two, and then we kind of start, to sort of spiral upwards. But yeah, it's learning to listen. And even in terms of dosages, I find that a lot of times, certainly with the GLP-1s, the dosages that are recommended are insane.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and we're not doing ourselves any favor with that, because our body loves to be nudged. So
Hmm.
to be gentle, I don't want ringing church bells and fireworks. When someone reports back to me and says, I feel so peaceful, good, that's where we want you.
Yeah.
Whereas if they, I feel so excited and so energetic, it's like, oh, we gotta, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some people come to me like, am I gonna get addicted to it? I see people like they can't get off of it, and I'm like, they're probably taking 3 to 5 times the amount that is a microdose. So
Many
you can
times.
easily, yeah, so sometimes you can easily taper off these things after a short period with absolutely no problem. Like, but if you totally take a sledgehammer and push your body all the way to the edge, it's going to be a lot harder to come back from that. Just like we were mentioning before, like if you push really hard, there's going to be something that pulls back.
Absolutely. And I would say the same thing goes for hormones. I'm very much a fan of, and only if necessary, working with microdoses of bioidentical hormones.
Mhm.
Um, Way smaller doses than any of the HRT. And in most cases, I mean, I would say 90% of my women don't even touch hormones, not none.
Throughout what age? What's the oldest that you've worked with?
67, 67.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, even women in full menopause, they're able to lose weight. There's this idea that being on hormones is going to help you lose weight. No,
It never
it's
helped me before, so I don't.
no, exactly. I mean, most of the women that I've spoken to and worked with, they've actually
Mm,
had the opposite experience.
yeah.
So, and maybe another thing to kind of throw into the conversation, because it's also so not spoken about within the realm of hormones. the whole talk about perimenopause is always about estrogen and the importance of estrogen. And this is where I kind of want to clarify, the very first hormone that tends to diminish in women is not estrogen, it's progesterone. And then we also have to understand why, because again, it's not just that hormones do their own thing. Progesterone diminishes. Why? Because of stress. So that's why we see so many women in their 30s and earlier now going through perimenopause and claiming they're in perimenopause. It's like, I'm sorry, that is just pure hormonal dysfunction.
Right.
But then they want to be super shredded with, like, 8% fat, 10% fat, whatever, which for women, you're going to have hormonal dysfunction. So you can't be all the things, be a super lady boss who just pushes all the time, but also be the perfect mom to three well-dressed children. Like, you can't have all of the things, but then also have perfectly balanced hormones. No, hormones is the first thing that's going to go. Progesterone is going to go. You're going to be anxious. You're going to not sleep well. And then the doctor is going to put you on, the full hormonal protocol, because that's what they learn.
Right.
And that's why when we listen to, social media, listen to it, everyone is punting the same shit, the same narrative, which is, and, if I hear another newcomer go, you know what we need, ladies? High protein diets, train hard, HRT. It's like, okay, right. Welcome, you're new.
Well, some of those women look really ripped, so it's tempting to be like, well, it works for her. How come it can't work for me? That's how they get you, is
Okay,
somebody who looks like they have the results.
sure. But there, let's also for a second talk about, really ripped, because that's another, a lot of women nowadays are punting this thing. Everything is about protein, everything is about muscle. Since when did women look like men, and since when was that a good thing? Like, there's a very deeply distorted
Yeah.
new vision, and it is so tempting, right? Because in some ways it's like, well, I'd rather be ripped than fat. And I was tempted down that route too, until I realized, yeah, but I don't want to look like a man. I mean, I don't mind looking toned, but I don't want to be shredded. I don't want to, like, I want to be like a woman. How can I go back to being a woman? Well, that takes more work. It is way easier to put you on hormones, to put you on a strict regime of high protein, high, progressive overload, give you a couple compounds. In 6 months, I can completely change your body. And then I'm going to pocket the testimonial and go, see you later. I've done my job. You look fantastic. What do you want? But then where are you going to be in 3, 4, 5, 10 years' time? You're not
Oh,
going to
yeah.
be in a better place.
I had one client who was so depleted and she had been put on testosterone by her doctor. She ran a marathon, and about 6 months into it, she was crashing so hard and gaining weight so fast. And I was just like, oh man, what, why would you put a 33-year-old woman on testosterone?
Yeah. And there's
Oh
people
man.
out there punting, well-known people that are punting that a testosterone level of 500 for women is completely okay.
Hmm.
And it's like, really? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm all for playing with biology, and, yes, we know that the values of labs and so forth are, not the it, but to go from, you know, yeah, to claim a level of 500 of testosterone is good for a woman, and any woman should be, as many of these biohackers are claiming, any woman should be on testosterone. We're having a huge departure here in terms of like what is actually healthy and sound.
Right. And I think it's attractive to a lot of women, especially like the perfectionist is COMT woman, fast COMT, because it's a shortcut to ignore settling down, to ignore having to go inward and be still and take rest, because we don't know how to do that. It's very uncomfortable.
I would say most of us don't know how to do that. And even when
Yeah,
we know how to do that, it's still uncomfortable.
right.
You know, like it gets easier to be in the discomfort. That yes. And then we know we have more wisdom to go, okay, yeah, here I go again, you know, into another round of downward spiral to grab the jewels that are here at the bottom to then come back up. And that, I mean, to me, that is the process of a life lived in depth. Whereas what a lot of the biohackers, as much as I like some biohacking tools, but this is where, you know, we really need to be able to use all of this with wisdom. You know, we don't need to be victims and kind of like live this purely natural life, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anymore. You know,
Right.
there's levels of toxicity we have fucked up big time. And can we stop romanticizing that? Can we stop thinking that, you know, like, oh, I'm going to go live in Bali or Costa Rica or elsewhere and life is perfect? No. Just the other day, I heard that Costa Rica is one of the biggest users of pesticides, like the biggest in the world. So, I mean, don't come and talk to me about Pura Vida in Costa Rica, you know, but like, let's be honest. And
Right.
it's, can we live with the truth of where we're at and then kind of as elegantly as possible, toggle between, okay, I'm going to do the natural things as natural as possible, but I'm also going to be wise and I'm going to use certain things so that I can, you know, be where I need to be where I want to be. And with the realization, forget about there being a perfect way.
Right. Yeah. And I love this as a stopping point, because that wraps everything up so perfectly. Is like there's no right or wrong way. Figure it out for yourself. Find what works for you. Find somebody, if you're not like interested in learning all this stuff, find somebody who is not going to tell you what to do, but who's going to honor your own intuition for what you need, and guide you and support you through that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate everything that we've talked about and you coming on today with me. Tell
Likewise.
everyone where to find you and how they could work with you.
So you can find me on EN.LIGHT.LIFE. And of course, Instagram, Alexandra Cousins. We have an academy where we teach practitioners and in various programs. So depending on what you're ready for in the journey, you can, you know, get started on your regenerative journey. I would say that's the key, is understand that regeneration is the game, and it, you begin and you never stop. It's a bit like going to the gym. You
Yeah.
know, you begin and you never stop.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you again. And thank you everyone for listening. I will see you guys later. Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.